Welcome back to the History Podcast. I'm Jason Thomason. In our previous episodes, we traced Assyria's rise from a small trading kingdom along the Tigris River through the Middle Assyrian recovery to the expansion and dominance of the Neo-Assyrian Empire under kings like Tiglath-Pileser, Sargon II, and Ashurbanipal. Today, in our final episode, we explore the empire's decline and ultimate collapse. A story of overstretched power, rebellion, and historic devastation. Ashurbanipal, reigning from 668 to 627 BCE, left Assyria at the peak of its territorial power. His library at Nineveh preserved knowledge, literature, and administration, but his death triggered instability. Like so many empires, the moment of greatest achievement carried the seeds of decline. Ashurbanipal had invested in culture, art, and scholarship, but succession planning was weak, and factional rivalries were already bubbling under the surface. Several kings followed Ashurbanipal, including Ashur-etil-ilani and Sinshar-ishkun. But internal rivalries undermined effective governance. Provinces grew restless, revolts erupted, and the central government increasingly relied on coercion rather than loyalty. For ordinary Assyrians, this instability was devastating. Farmers faced heavier tribute demands as the crown tried to squeeze resources. Merchants saw trade routes disrupted by raids. Soldiers were called into constant campaigns against rebels instead of foreign conquests. Daily life, once stable under Ashurbanipal, now became uncertain. The empire's vast size made communication difficult. Messages could take weeks to reach distant provinces. Governors often collected tribute but withheld full payment, or plotted against the throne. These structural weaknesses made Assyria vulnerable, despite its military might. Meanwhile, Babylonia seized the opportunity to rise again. Nabopolassar, a charismatic and capable leader, consolidated power around 626 BCE. He exploited anti-Assyrian sentiment and built alliances with the Medes, a powerful Iranian people controlling lands east of Assyria. The alliance was both strategic and deadly. Nabopolassar brought experience in siegecraft and diplomacy, while the Medes contributed cavalry, manpower, and tactical ingenuity. Together, they presented an unprecedented challenge to Assyria's overstretched armies. Babylonian records describe relentless campaigns along the Euphrates and northern plains. Fortresses were burned, canals destroyed, and loyal Assyrian governors executed or defected. These weren't isolated battles. They were coordinated attacks aimed at dismantling the empire's infrastructure itself. In addition, remnants of Urartu and Scythians and other displaced peoples joined rebellions or raided Assyrian borders. These combined threats created a multi-front crisis. Assyria's internal weaknesses amplified the dangers, turning distant problems into existential threats. The defining moment came in 612 BCE. Cyaxares, king of the Medes, and Nabopolassar led a massive combined army against Nineveh. Archaeology shows that the attackers breached walls and systematically destroyed the city. Layers of ash, collapsed buildings, and mass burials attest to the ferocity of the siege. Archaeologists at Kuyungjik, the mound of ancient Nineveh, found arrowheads embedded in palace walls and collapsed rooms filled with burned clay tablets. The once grand throne room of Ashurbanipal became a burial ground, the royal archives sealed beneath layers of soot and rubble. Ancient sources describe the fall of Nineveh in apocalyptic terms. Flames rose into the sky, walls crumbled, and rivers turned black with soot. For Assyria's neighbors, it was a moment of grim celebration. The mighty empire that once terrorized them was finally undone. Assyrian sources describe desperate defense measures, flooding canals to hinder attackers, deploying remaining troops in urban street fighting, and attempting to rally vassal states. Despite these efforts, Sinshar Ishkun was killed, and Nineveh fell. The human cost was staggering. Contemporary accounts and archaeological evidence suggest mass deaths, forced migrations, and widespread famine. Farmers, artisans, and merchants fled in terror. Families were torn apart. Fields lay fallow. Homes burned. Many Assyrians were deported or enslaved, echoing Assyria's own former policies of population relocation. The empire that had once ruled much of the Near East in terror was now itself a cautionary tale. After Nineveh, Assyria briefly survived in Ashur under Ashur-uballit II. From 612 to 609 BCE, he attempted to hold the empire together, but Babylonian and Median forces pursued him relentlessly. The cities of Haran and Kalu fell. By 609 BCE, Assyria ceased to exist as a political entity. Environmental stress added to the calamity. Droughts and famine around 620 to 610 BCE disrupted agriculture, weakened armies, and limited the empire's ability to sustain itself. Trade networks collapsed, cutting off revenue and eroding loyalty in far-flung provinces. Overextension, internal dissent, and external pressure combined to make the collapse inevitable. But the fall of Assyria also reshaped the world map. Babylon became the new superpower of the Near East, with Nebuchadnezzar II soon to follow. Egypt intervened, allying with remnants of Assyria, only to be defeated by Babylon at the Battle of Carchemish in 605 BCE. Out of Assyria's ruins, new empires and rivalries emerged. Yet not all traces of Assyria vanished overnight. Refugees fled westward into Syria, the Levant, and Anatolia, carrying their language, symbols, and administrative traditions. In these borderlands, Assyrian scribes and artisans continued to work under new masters, preserving fragments of a fallen civilization. Despite the collapse, Assyria's legacy endured. Standing armies, siegecraft, and provincial control systems influenced later empires, including the Persians and Greeks. Ashurbanipal's library preserved cuneiform tablets, including the Epic of Gilgamesh, hymns, and legal documents. Nineveh and Dur-Sharrukin inspired city planning, monumental architecture, and sculpture for centuries. The Assyrian model of divine kingship and state sanctioned violence shaped how later rulers justified authority and conquest. Assyria's memory lived on in another way, through the Hebrew Bible. Prophets like Nahum and Isaiah described the fall of Nineveh as the judgment of the God of Israel. Even centuries later, Assyria remained the symbol of arrogance brought low, a story of divine justice woven into Israelite memory. Assyria's collapse also serves as a cautionary lesson. Empires built on fear and overextension are vulnerable, no matter how advanced their administration or how powerful their armies. Over the course of this series, we've walked through the entire arc of Assyria's story, from its fragile beginnings along the Tigris River to its fierce kings who carved out an empire through conquest, to the dazzling heights of cultural achievement under Ashurbanipal. We've seen how Assyria built one of the most sophisticated war machines the world had ever known. We've seen how propaganda, architecture, and religion all work together to project the king's authority. And we've seen how ordinary people, farmers, artisans, scribes, and soldiers, made that empire function day after day. But we've also seen the costs. The brutality that terrified enemies also bred resentment. The vastness of the empire made it strong, but also fragile. And, like so many empires that followed, Assyria discovered that raw power alone cannot guarantee survival. The Assyrian story, though more than 2,500 years old, still resonates today. It reminds us that human ambition can achieve wonders. Libraries, cities, armies, and networks of trade stretching across continents. But it also reminds us that arrogance, overreach, and injustice carry consequences. In the end, Assyria's rise and fall is more than ancient history. It is a timeless lesson about power, fragility, and the cycles of human civilization. That's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining me. We'll see you next time.